Welcome to the July meeting of IGDA Las Vegas. I want to start this off by offering a special message of thanks. This is going to be Grover's last meeting as the chairperson of the IGDA Las Vegas. Without Grover, we would have no chapter, and it's really amazing that Grover has taken us through inception to the current state of having over 500 members in our meetup. So again, much thanks for that. And Grover, I'd like to give you the honor of introducing Paul.
Thank you, Larry. You also took what was in most of my script, but yeah, thank you all for attending the meeting. Paul Vela, he worked with me since our studio whimindie, since we started back in 2012. He was there from when we cleaned up the studio when it was just like a small, closed down store to what it is now. If it wasn't for Paul, whimindie would have crashed and burned several years ago. He kept everything going. So I am really in debt and grateful that he's been at my side and working and keeping this studio going all these years. So that's my introduction. So yeah, Paul, take it away.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Grover. This is the part where I kind of say, everyone give Grover a round of applause, right? But social distancing. So thank you, Dustin. I see you taking care of that. So yeah, Grover, I remember when Grover took on the IGDA here in Vegas, I thought he was out of his mind. I still think he's out of his mind, but it's nice to see that Grover developed this, and he's had a hand in helping a lot of people out. So it's truly an honor and a privilege for me to be his last speaker during his tenure. So yeah. So anyways, who I am. I'm Paul Vela. I am the administrative director at Women Independent Studios, whimindie for short. That's what we kind of go by. And why am I here? The undertaking of starting an independent studio was one, and I'll be honest, is one that I was not ready for. It was something that I had to learn along the way. It was something that we had to pretty much learn the lessons through and through. So I'm kind of here just to impart some of that knowledge onto anyone who has that inclination that they want to start, their own independent game studio, and to see if I just can't talk you out of it. I mean, that was part of the little bio going into it. So we're going to get started. It's going to kind of be 3 parts to it. It's going to be a little background on me and who I am and how I came here and developed these skills. And then a little bit about what my role is at whimindie. And then lastly, my do's and don'ts of running a game company. So let's get this party started. So a little bit about me. My very first job straight out of high school was working in the classroom. I worked in a English language learners program, working with students from different countries who are learning English as their second, third, fourth, 11th language. Just helping them out in the classroom. Later on, throughout my undergrad, I was heavily involved as a board member in a nonprofit organization. They asked me to be a board member, and I've been part of the board since 2011. I've got my bachelor's degree in psychology from Cal State San Bernardino. Notice it says psychology and not business administration. It doesn't say accounting or any of those traditional roles that you see in charge of the business admin. So just keep that in. That's kind of one of my main points I'm going to make going forward. If I can click, it's going to go, maybe. Okay, maybe too fast. So in 2012, I'm sure most of you are old enough to remember, 2012 was the year the Great Recession kicked in, and a lot of things changed. And one of those things that had to change was I need to make a career, a different career. So I got involved in juvenile corrections. I did that for over 5.5 years. In the middle of that, I decided to go back to school because juvenile corrections wasn't for me. I went back to school and got my master's degree in school counseling, and I got that in 2018. And I've been a practicing school counselor since February of 2019. So, what a beautiful full moon, said no school counselor ever. And that goes for anyone dealing with people, really. All you retail people, I see you out there, you also fear the full moon. I hear you on that one. So, but kind of the impact about a little bit about me and why I call this business admin for dummies is because I have no formal training in business administration. So one of the other co-founders at whimindie is a fan of saying, Paul, a monkey could do your job, but we can't afford the monkey. So here you are. And not to compare me to the expertise of a monkey, but it's just saying that it's a career that I had to pick up the knowledge of doing along the way and the lessons I learned along the way without any formal tutelage. So just so you guys are aware, at the top of the screen, you see my role, whimindie, but there is a quote. I got it from a video game I used to play. If any of you can guess what the video game is, there might be a prize for you. There might not be. I don't know. But if you can come up with a quote, we can think of something. So the first part of that quote is the thing about history. So whimindie was founded in 2012 by Grover and two of his friends. I'm one of them. And my original task was to formalize the onboarding process. It's to get people to sign legally binding agreements, our contributors, right? Pen and paper agreements with signatures from all parties and clear guidelines to compensation. The purpose was to make sure we have everything on paper, make sure everyone knows how much they're going to get paid and what an amount to get paid in. I want to say I was prepared for this, but I really wasn't. Just the amount of back and forth with people and bringing them to the table and making sure everyone does sign their agreements was truly an undertaking. But that was kind of work on my feet wet with it. And the more things change, to go along with the quotes, like I said, it's not much, but it's honest work, right? So the first thing I had to do was define the relationships with the contributors, right? And here at whimindie, we have three categories of contributors. We have one of the admin, one of the people that run the studio. Then we have employees, and then we have independent contractors. And knowing what each of those different positions entails, what it goes into those different positions, what's required by law. For example, you can exercise greater control over your employees, but what comes with that, you got to pay them minimum wage that varies state by state. With independent contractors, they exercise greater control over their schedule and over what they do, but at the same time, they have more liberty in how they perform the tasks that you contract them for. Usually their rates pretty upfront, and we'll talk about budgeting for those rates later on. Job descriptions. So starting whimindie from the top, right? Or from the bottom, we had to make sure that everyone knew what their position was and make sure we're outlining each position, make sure there is no question about what that position is meant to do. If they start crossing into another position, let's say a game designer starts doing the roles of maybe a game programmer, there's going to be some overlap, and it could end up being one of those situations where you have too many cooks in the kitchen kind of thing. So you want to clearly define the job descriptions and make sure everyone knows what they're supposed to do, who they report to, how often they're to report, and just keeping all those things. And all these things just pretty much go right into that the aforementioned agreement that you are to draw up with your contributors. Interviews. Oh, this is a fun one. At some point, we ran out of people within Grover's close circle of friends that were, could we bring on board for talent-wise. And at some point, we had to start interviewing other people to come into the studio, and there's a lot that goes with interviewing more than just asking basic, well, walk me through your resume kind of questions. There's a litany of items that you are and are not permitted to ask during a job interview. These questions have a lot to do with let's say, for example, gender expression, religion, things of that nature. So the only exception to that, if it's a job requirement, and what comes with that is something called a bona fide job requirement, and that means you can't perform the job without having this requirement. So anything outside of those kind of topics and questions, I make sure that everyone who does conduct interviews at whimindie know what those are, and we try to avoid those pretty much at all costs. Onboarding, we kind of alluded to it a little bit earlier in the earlier slide that it was really complicated getting people to sign, putting pen to paper, and to me it signifies once they put pen to paper, the commitment, the responsibility, and that they're expected to perform at a certain rate, and not everyone is ready for that. Some people rather keep it fun and casual, but I'm gonna go over it later, but not fun and casual doesn't hold up in court. So onboarding was very important. It was getting people to the table and making sure everything was signed. They know what to expect. They get the proper email links to accounts, log into our communication methods, and everything that goes with that. Business plans. This was probably the most painful part for everybody, bringing everyone to the table to discuss what direction whimindie was going into. Grover was a huge fan of saying, all right, let's get this train wreck on the road, right? And it pretty much came down to Grover and Matt and the other co-founders feeling that their time and effort could be spent elsewhere, on being productive, right? Coming up with content for their projects. And the reason why I dragged them to the table to come up with business plans is because we need a solidified plan to make sure the studio is running at its peak efficiency. And when we're starting to put money into it, making sure that money is used wisely and we're held accountable for everything. So there's some strong words there, accountability. Keep that in mind. Policies and procedures. Now we're getting to the deep stuff, right? The old adage is never be the person that your company ends up writing policy for, right? Don't do anything silly that you might break it for everyone else and they have to develop policy for. A lot of the lessons learned at whimindie is due to people's lack of, doing things uncopacetically. Well, there's nothing that says I can't. Well, I guess now we got to write the rule book, right? Now we got to whip these out. And the best part about policy and procedures is once you write them, they're there. You have a plan on how to deal with things. Maybe the end result ends up being automatic termination of a contributor, whatever their capacity is. And the best of business practices will guide that. Like, for example, whimindie, the biggest thing is, discrimination, harassment. Those are absolute no-nos. You are terminated. There's pretty much no questions asked, zero tolerance policy. There's other things such as ghosting, right? We think of ghosting in the dating scene, right? Where you just, the back and forth messages and they just disappear off the face of the earth. But what if this happens in the business world? After an interview, you come to terms, you sign, everything's going great. Maybe they turn in 3 awesome art pieces and then they're gone. How do you handle that? How much time do you give them to communicate with you? At whimindie, it's 3 months. We have a 3-month little warning policy, and everyone's notified, this is, you have 3 months to get back to us. If not, we have to go in a different direction. And that comes with the show must go on kind of thing. Making sure everyone has the right tools. So independent contractors, not so much. They usually come pre-equipped. They come with their own stuff. Employees, when you bring on your employees, you need to make sure they have everything they need to get things the way you want done. Sometimes independent contractors might have trouble attaining certain software or hardware. And sometimes we have to make the decision, well, what's the pros and cons of giving them access? Do they start blurring that line between employee and independent contractor? And we kind of have to handle a case-by-case basis. Sometimes it ends up being a gift for the independent contractor. Here, there's a gift from whimindie. If you use it for other projects, feel free to, and that's your entrance into the industry. And that's kind of what whimindie's been all about, giving people opportunities to excel and continue going forward. And the more they stay the same. So if anyone can get that quote from that video game, if you can get it right, more power to you. If not, it's all right, no prize for you. Even if there was a prize, I did just say there's going to be a prize. I don't know. So budgets, spreadsheets. I spreadsheet for just about everything. I have a spreadsheet for an individual team. I have an overall studio management spreadsheets. I have the yearly budget, the year to date, compensation, which we'll touch in a minute. But the best thing about the budgets is when you're trying to hire somebody and having the back and forth with them. You know, well, what's your budget? Well, what's your rate? Well, what's your budget? What's your rate? And pretty much going into that conversation with a contributor and you knowing what your budget is and knowing what you're willing to allocate it for. Because at the end of the day, whether you're playing with your money out of your own pocket or from investors or through a crowdfunding campaign, at the end of the day, you have to be held accountable for what you're spending, and if to anybody, to yourself, to know where that money is going. So keeping in budgets and everything in line, it's so imperative. Compensation checks and primarily keeping track of compensation. Sometimes I have a really great contributor that does amazing work. Sometimes we don't agree upon the compensation right up front, and we end up having to pay them in amounts later on down the road. So sometimes you have to chunk it, 1 month X amount and 1 month Y amount, and go along that way. It just really depends on making sure you have that in writing up front. So it's preventative, making sure that they're not exceeding your capacity either. That's what setting budgets is so important. And then keeping track of compensation, because you want to know who you've paid. Because I'm sure those contributors are going to be really happy to cash that check, even though you might have paid them the month before. They're not gonna tell you if they're great contributors and they want the relationship with you. They're gonna say, "Hey, you sent me a check in error." Some might not, so it's just something to keep track of. Keeping track of local and federal laws. The bane of my existence has been AB 5 in California. That required us to reclassify a lot of our programmers as independent contractors, and it's truly scary to know that the law has so much effect on your bottom line. Just knowing that you have to keep track of all these things consistently. It's ever evolving. It's not the happiest circumstances, but it is what it is, and you have to abide by them at the end of the day. Digital onboarding, especially in this during COVID, post-COVID, what's it going to look like? I have no idea. That's above my pay grade. But what digital onboarding looks like, right? And I use a service called Adobe Sign. I'm not paid to plug that in. It's just what I use. It's really user-friendly. It sends copies of the agreements to all the parties involved. As soon as we clear somebody through the interview process, we all agree that they're coming on board. I send a draft of the proposed agreement to them. They review it, and once they review it, I send it through Adobe Sign. I sign it, the team lead of the contributor signs it, and of course the contributor, and then every party gets a copy. And then they hold on to it in a database. And it makes onboarding just so much simpler than just paper and mail, as when I first started with whimindie. It's remarkable. And I've had to refer back to those agreements. One time in whimindie's history, I've had to invoke the agreement on a contributor and make sure they were doing what they're supposed to do with the content we tasked them with doing. So it kind of saves, CYA in this world. And then my personal favorite one is troubleshooting interpersonal conflicts. Intra, I do that too, but we're talking about interpersonal. And dealing with the egos that come with game development and dealing with people working together collaboratively. And sometimes people don't agree and see eye to eye on things. And usually when it gets to the point where it comes across my desk, it's gone way farther than it should have. And at that point, we're kind of sitting all together and saying, okay, well, let's go over what happened and what led to this. And it's usually lack of communication, what it comes down to. And communication is so important going forward in anything that we do in the not only in the industry but working with other people. People are we're all complicated, right? So if we own that and we work together, we can make amazing things. So at this point, I kind of want to pause and make sure that anyone that had the mentality of, well, I'm going to start my own independent studio with blackjack and buffets and a ping pong table, and now I'm kind of going over everything that I did, and you're like, well, first of all, don't panic. That's the least thing you want to do. I'm going to go through some little strategies, some little do's and don'ts about what I did with my keys for success. I will have to make a little disclaimer. These are not guaranteed to be successful for everybody. Everyone's circumstances are different. These worked for whimindie through painstaking trial and error, and I'm able to impart these on everybody because they work for whimindie. They might not work for you, and just something to keep in mind. I don't want you coming back a year later and saying, Paul, I did everything you told me to do. And I'm like, did you read the disclaimer? Fair enough. So, do number one, I kind of went over this. I'm gonna hit you over the head with it again, is get everything in writing. It's so important to have that piece of agreements with whoever your contributor is. And make sure it's in writing. Everything has to, any contributor. And that goes with friends, especially friends, because sometimes your friends will not get that clear definition that now we're in a business mode, right? And you always have that agreement on hand to say, hey, we're best friends and we've known each other since high school, but you need to abide by your agreement. And sometimes there's issues that come with that. Gentlemen's agreements don't hold up in court. So you can shake on it and you think they can abide by it, but at the end of the day, if they start divulging information that's not covered in the non-disclosure agreement, and you end up taking it to court, and then they bring up the non-disclosure agreement and didn't cover that, well, we shook on it. Well, it wasn't in writing, so we didn't have to abide by it. They say chivalry is dead. So operate on that mentality, right? And then last but not least, make sure all parties get a copy. The digital onboarding is really, really good with that. And it's all there, black and white, clear as crystal. Figure out your finances with your co-founders, investors, and your contributors even before this happens. Where's my money? Where is it? And it's all about making sure those clear lines of communication are set. Make sure expectations are set. Make sure timelines are reasonable. Make sure everything you're talking to your contributors about, your co-founders, your investors, and that includes your Kickstarter people. If you launch a Kickstarter campaign, make sure you're talking to them and make sure they know where the money's going. They know where you're keeping track of things. By far, know that in terms of any grants and loans that you have, the repayment, I know a lot of small businesses got a little bailout from the federal government, the Small Business Administration, and make sure that some loans you might have to, will have to repay. Just know what the terms of those are and how timely you have to be repaying those things. Be able to report progress accurately to those who hold your purse strings. And at the end of the day, that could very well be you. You're supplementing your projects on the side, your little side income. Sometimes income's not always the quickest to come around the table, right? But you have to be accountable. You have to know where that money is going and make sure it's done right. And you're holding contributors accountable. You're holding yourself accountable, and just everyone involved. And then accountability, and then be a straight shooter. By that, but what I mean by that is, you don't want to fill somebody up with sunshine and pixie dust, and everything's going to be okay when the room's on fire and there's nothing's happening, nothing's going right. Yes, you might be saving face up front, but when you have to initially announce that the game has to be delayed for X reason, you have to answer to your people. You have to answer at some point about that. One of the quotes I've been using lately from I think it's the HBO series Chernobyl. Every lie you tell incurs a debt to the truth, and at some point that debt has to be paid. And when the truth comes and needs to be paid up, it's going to pay up hard, and it might necessarily ruin your credibility. And as we've gone over in the past in the IGDA meetings here, is the game development world is a small world, and once your credibility is shot with one person, that word's going to get out. So you want to be as much of a straight shooter as possible. One of the favorite adages is make sure you share with everybody. You give yourself some time. So let's say your projected release is 6 weeks away. Maybe tell everybody 10 weeks away, and you might come a little earlier, and then everyone's happier that way. But if you do encounter delays, you have some inbuilt time. So some things you can do personally to help yourself along the way, and so you can make sure to be accountable for those things, those delays. Life happens, right? Especially with everything going on with COVID. I know how many video games have been delayed in the past 6 months due to everything going on with the pandemic. Do number 3, come up with short and long-term goals. So a journey starts with a single step in the right direction. And we can start making inroads towards a goal. Overall, the goal is to make a project that everyone loves and buys, and we end up being able to retire to an island in the Maldives, right? And that could be the very long-term goal. But by that, there's no really achievable ways of getting to that island in the Maldives, right? Making that video game that everyone's going to buy en masse. So the secret is to set achievable, measurable, and time-bound goals to guide your progress. And this is the part where you drag your group of people together and talk about what that goal looks like. But before you drag all those people together, you want to know what direction you want to go in. Yes, you want that island in the Maldives. Sure, by all means. But we still need to finish chapter 3 by November. And what are the goals what are the steps you're gonna take to making sure you can reach that goal by November? Or shoot, by next week even. What are you gonna do in the meantime? What's gonna keep your productivity high? Well, are you gonna pay that writer to have the script done by then? By that time, what's their progress looking like? Your editor, even when it comes to more story-based games, is the story continuity in order, and it's all these things you have to look at. And you can set goals for each and every one of these things. And as you set these goals, keep in mind that it's never too late to change tech. Tech is a sailing term that I like to employ in this kind of case. And a ship could run aground and you can still change your tech. You can start sailing in a different direction. If you start seeing issues ahead, storms on the horizon, don't be afraid to change your tech. if you start foreseeing problems, some issues, be proactive about it. Know what these issues are on the horizon and have a plan for tackling those things. I would like to say that I knew what to do when AB5 was coming down the pipeline, and I was pretty much in denial about it up until maybe 2 to 3 months before 2020 kicked in and it became the law of the land. And there was one of those oh crap moments. What do I do now? And that came with its consequences. But it's never too late to change your tack. But yes, goals. Everyone gets a goal. You get a goal. Everyone gets a goal. Surrounding yourself with other individuals who share your passion. And while it's true that nobody's going to share your exact same passion, no one's going to love your game the way you do. No one's going to, wake up first thing in the morning and say, I'm going to work on so-and-so's project. It's not going to happen. No one's going to have that same level of excitement about what you have going on than what you do. But I'm going to try to get you to do as close as you can. You want to bring people together that have taken an interest in your game along the way. Maybe they're your contributors, maybe an estranged family member who's giving you some commentary on it, and bring everyone together. Get everyone on a Zoom call these days. Doesn't necessarily have to be a traditional table, but bring everyone together and listen to what they have to say. And it's something both positive and negative. And Grover alluded to it in his presentation a few months back, is that you have to be receptive to the feedback. Because let's be honest, we're all gamers here for the most part. We all play video games. And we know our fellow gamers are not the kindest of the bunch, right? They have high expectations. They want their video game and they want it the way they like it, and change is awful. And how dare you delay my game by 3 months because of COVID? If you are not able to handle feedback, either positive or negative, from your inner circle, from your group of people, then there's no way you're going to be able to handle it from the general public. So make sure you gather a team together, and not just yes people, but you want people who are able to call you on your stuff and say, well, that's an okay goal, but we can make it better. And that's what you want. You want people to call you on your stuff. You want them to say, this could be better. And then you have to listen to them. And, well, you don't have to, but I would prefer you to listen to them because they're telling you it from a place of wanting to help you out as opposed to tearing you down, like so much of our fellow gamers, right? Present company included, of course. Be selective. Know who you're going to bring into your inner circle. One is not simply enter the circle of trust. To keep in mind who these people are. Make sure the people you can trust. Even if you can't trust them, still give them an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement, because you're going to be talking about sensitive topics you have not prepared yet for public knowledge. And know who you can and cannot trust with this information. Know that they're not going to just blurt it out in the middle of, their third cousin's family reunion. You want them to keep things as under wraps as possible, be selective about it, know who you can trust and know who you can't trust. And that leads directly into the other side of the coin, right? The don'ts. And the don't, number one, is hang on to contributors for loyalty's sake. And this goes without saying, but these are the criteria I judge somebody when they're up for termination. Are they toxic? Are they grossly unreliable? Or they're reluctant to adapt, change, compromise. And as if any of those things or any of those things, they got to go. Once they've dug in their heels and said they're not willing to adapt, change, compromise, and no matter of what cajoling you can do to them, short of, bribing them, even that might not even work, they have to go. If they're toxic and just more than beyond just giving you negative feedback, they're continuously putting you down, They're calling your work, chastising you beyond the normal, right? They think that their stuff doesn't stink and all that jazz, right? Or at the last but not least, they're grossly unreliable. And I had to put in that qualifier grossly in there. It's not just they missed a couple meetings here and there. No, it's an inconsistent. It's something that you continuously expect them to show up for, and they don't. And once they become unreliable, like anything else in the industry, right? Word's going to get around that this person's unreliable and you don't want to work with them anymore. These people have to go. And it's not personal. It's just good business. And if they take it personally, it's not your fault. And this is why, this is why it's so imperative that you set your boundaries for running your business up front. Like, yes, we're best friends, but from Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, from 3 p.m. to 8 p.m., let's say that's your development time. That this is a business relationship now. And I expect you to do X, Y, and Z as outlined in your agreement. And some people, and in women's experience, it's happened where they're like, "Nah, I can't produce that. I'm sorry. Give me till 6 months from now." And we're going to be like, "Okay, that's not a problem. You take your 6 months, but we're going to assign those tasks to somebody else." Sometimes we don't wait those 6 months for somebody else. We do wait those 6 months, and they come and they're reliable, and they come back bigger and better than ever. But not everyone, it took a lot for that person to reach that level of trust. If someone is just continuously dropping the ball on you, the show must go on, and you have to be willing to cut ties with people. And especially if they're toxic. And they're going to, at the end of the day, at the end game stage, they're going to cause more heartache than they are anything else. And you have to do what's best for your project and your bottom line, and you have to be okay with spending the money you're spending, whether it's yours or not. And sometimes people just have to go. Number 2, don't put off being, and I'm saying this in quotations, government official. What that means is there are certain categories within the government that you become an official entity. Your studio becomes its own thing. It's two categories that indies work with is sole proprietorships and limited liability corporation. Women Independent Studios, LLC is their official name. And the reason we chose an LLC as our formal legal standing is because it protects your personal assets. So let's say, in 30 years when whimindie is worth what Larry was alluding to earlier, what Epic's worth, right? I could dream. And we breach contract at some point along the way. Women Independent Studios is an LLC, and whatever this lawsuit takes out is out of the entity's pocketbooks, as opposed to coming after the people in charge. There's some differentials in there. There's some, we think of the 90s and with the .com bubble bursting and all that. That's different. It's just LLCs at the basic level. If you think that's a billion, that's unreal. I got you, Larry. LLCs, then we have sole proprietorships. Maybe you're not willing to take that dive off and make it an official LLC or any other organization within state and federal laws. Maybe you want to start slowly and go ease yourself into a sole proprietorship. Those give you a great deal of benefits right off the start. Tax breaks, tax write-offs, writing things off as business expenses. Hey, you want to pick Larry's brain for an evening, take him out to dinner, and you're talking about your project. Guess what? You can write off that meal as a business expense. Just make sure you're going with the first recommendations of making sure you're keeping that money away from your personal money, if that makes sense. You have a personal bank account, and then you have a business bank account. what everything that goes into that, just be aware of a lot of fees and a lot of archaic methods that go along with that. So for example, when Women Independent Studios became a thing, we started off as a sole proprietorship. So that required us going to our county government in California and saying, we want to become a sole proprietorship. And one of the requirements for that is declaring a DBA, or doing business as Women Independent Studios. We had to publish that DBA into a black and white print newspaper. And I mean, that's as archaic as it comes, right? You know, we've entered an age of technology and verification and all these different things, but yet we're still relying on newspapers to publish a list of companies going operating as their own entities. So just be aware of that and the requirements that each local, state, federal requires. For example, LLCs. We are a California-based LLC, and I don't mind sharing this because it's public knowledge. Every LLC in California has to pay a minimum of $800 a year to be an established LLC in California, and then everything that comes with that. Now, a solution that's been offered is, well, can't you start an LLC in another state? Sure, you can, but as long as you're still conducting business in another state, you are still held to that state standards. So if we start the LLC in Nevada, we are a Nevada-based LLC, but we're doing business in California as well. And then we still have to go to California's archaic methods of doing things. I'm not saying Nevada is any better or worse, but $800 in California, just keep that in mind if you want to do business in California. And a little footnote there, maybe you can see it, maybe you can't, but I know I was on the verge of tears looking at all the fees of making whimindie its own entity. I'm sure my FBI guy was crying with me. But at the end of the day, you want that separation from your personal assets. You just want that protection. You want to keep things separate, and you want to be good with Uncle Sam. Just put it that way. Don't number 3. Don't ignore making a business plan. You remember all those people, like-minded people, non-toxic, reliable, you know those people? Yeah, this is the point you bring them all together and talk about your goals and the direction you want to go in. And then put it on paper or Google Doc or whatever your preference is. And make sure you're going over these things as often as you can. And make sure you're, there's a word again, accountable. And you're asking yourself the hard questions. Are you meeting your goals? Why or why not? And then being honest with your team. These people are the people that you want in your corner when stuff inevitably hits the fan. They're going to be there for you to hopefully help clean up the pieces. And if you're honest with them from the get-go, you're going to be a lot better off for it. With that in mind, you still have to ask yourself these questions. Why are you not meeting your goals? Is it a lack of fit? Is this contributor the right person for the job? Is this something you want to keep doing? And that's the hardest question you have to ask yourself. Are you more of a micromanager? Are you more of a laissez-faire, kind of let everything go at its own pace? And are you comfortable with that? Are you comfortable with that time and energy spent into it? And if the answer at all during that is no, then the question you have to ask yourself is, then who's the better person for the job? And as long as you are still making a go out of this and you're making sure you're making an effort out of this, then you can sleep comfortably at night and making sure you know where all this money is going and where is it going to. And of course, being receptive to feedback. Again, it's so imperative to have those opinions of people that care about you, people that care about your project, and they want you to do well. They want you to succeed. If they don't want you to succeed, go refer to don't number 1, they got to go, right? But if these people want to see you be successful, listen to them. It's a moment where we all kind of have to take stock of our own egos and say, well, this isn't working. What could work instead, right? And being okay with that. And compromise is the big word in this. And it all comes down to interpersonal relationships, right? Or interpersonal, excuse me, interpersonal relationships, and being okay with how things are going and how they're turning up. And sometimes you don't always get your way. And your counter argument, but Paul, this is my studio, it should be going my way. Yes, but your way isn't always the path to success. And something you have to keep in mind. I put a graphic up from the South Park episode where the underwear gnomes are taking underwear and they're harvesting and collecting it, and they don't know what's in the middle, but phase 3 is profit, right? Your goal should be able to fill in that gap. Your business plan should be able to fill in what that phase 2 looks like. And you might not just need 3 phases, you might need more phases. And just know that your business plan has to fill in that gap, and know that everything you have to do between, game programming or arts or music composition, everything in the middle has to come together. And then hopefully at the end it's profit. And last but not least, and Larry touched on it on the beginning, and I like so much of that. But before worrying about others' mental health, and this is me, the counselor in the room talking, right? Worry about your own mental health first. It's so sometimes disheartening to put a little bit of yourself out there just for it to get crushed. That's why so many people are reluctant to put a little bit of themselves out there, and they're worried about what the reception is going to be and what that looks like, or what it's not good enough. What if no one likes it? I mean, there's people bought Duke Nukem when it came out, right? I mean, just be real. So keep that in mind, that the bar is sometimes could be lower than you think it is. And not saying you want to set yourself for that low bar. What I'm saying is you want to put yourself out there and be okay with the results. Game development, game programming, game anything. If anything in my, 8 years of whimindie 7? I lost count. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon. There's going to be so many moving pieces into your game. People, especially, it's going to be hard to work with some people. It's going to be hard to get everything together, and it's just a lot of things coming together at once. So pace yourself. Some days it's okay not to work on your game, and then you're arguing with yourself, well, Paul, I don't feel like I'm being productive enough if I'm not working on my game. And my counter to that is, are you giving your game the best of you at that point? And if the answer is no, then maybe you should take a day off or a week off, or what have you. And that's where that inbuilt timeline is for you. So you can take a mental health day if you need to, or more than one if that case. Your failure is only complete if you don't learn from it. Speaking from the well of experience here, you want to learn from your failures. You want to, when a goal doesn't go through, you want to look at that goal closely and say, why did we fail that goal? Why did what happened? Or kind of a post-mortem right on it, and make sure that you're not repeating those mistakes. Make sure that you're looking at it objectively. And I know it's so hard because, again, that is your baby you're putting out there and drop kicking out of the nest. But it's something you have to learn from your failures. And if not, then you're going to just keep repeating the same thing over, and that's not productive to anybody. You can't pour out from an empty cup. You got to take care of yourself first. And I know that's really hard for a lot of people to realize. Maybe you are the person that consistently is helping other people, putting out other people's fires, constantly helping people through their conflicts and what's going on with them. Maybe you're somebody else's caretaker, and you're balancing that with life and work and your indie project, and just finding time for you is a struggle at the end of the day. You are not able to give your best of yourself to others if you're not taking care of you first. And I think that's something we all want to strive for, is giving the best of ourselves to others. And if you're not able to do that, again, you have to take stock and maybe do take that mental health day. Maybe do walk away from your project for an extended amount of time. One of my favorite review people, Yahtzee Croshaw, Zero Punctuation on The Escapist. He was working on a project for an X amount of time. I'm forgetting what number that was. And he got to a point where he couldn't work on it anymore. He lost all drive. He lost all wanting to work on it. And he had to take stock and realize what he was doing. And I'm taking a year off from the project. Not everyone is in that capacity to take a year off from their project. They have timelines to meet. They have investors to keep track of. They have, people to be held accountable to. And I get all that. But again, if you're consistently pouring out of yourself, at some point you have to refill that, or you're just pouring out emptiness, and that's not helping anybody. Little things to do when you're feeling discouraged. The first thing you want to go, kind of tell yourself is what you're experiencing is a tough situation. But let me reassure you, you're a tough individual for being able to go through that and experience that and come out hopefully the other end bigger and better for it. The things you put yourself through are not in vain. Putting a little bit of yourself out there consistently, up for critique from the public. I get it. I know it's hard, but this is the industry we've all chosen to be part of, and just know that you're tough and you can get through this. I may not be able to control the situation, but I am in charge of how I respond, and that's so imperative, folks. Is you sometimes you can't control other people and how they're going to handle things and situations, but what you can do is control how you're going to react to it. Could you rage quit and Alt F4 or Control F4, or what the keystroke for rage quitting is these days? But how are you going to, is that the appropriate response? Right. So just know that it's up to you how you're going to respond to situations. This is too hard. I haven't figured it out yet. And there's the key word is yet, right? There are multiple tools and scenarios out there that you can take kind of a self-help class and help you get through things. And me, speaking from experience again, many a times I have gone to the well of Google trying to figure out a formula for my spreadsheet. And sometimes the Google gods have shined down on me and give me the exact solution I need to fix the formula I'm trying to make. Don't be discouraged when you run into a wall. Don't be afraid to ask for help. You haven't been able to figure it out yet. The challenge is here to teach me something. Going in with that mentality is so very refreshing for people, that you're here to learn from the situation, right? Maybe your first project isn't the commercial success that will lead to you buying the island in the Maldives. Learn from it. Look on what could have gone differently. What could you have done? What people you could have got in contact with. Learn from it, and maybe your next project will be that next project. And it's going with that growth mindset, right? That the idea that you can continue to do better, bigger and better things as you learn from the challenges you've encountered. And then sometimes all you need to do is take things one step at a time and breathe, and then do the next thing, and the right thing. A lot of the times the right thing isn't always, I'm quoting a movie that I used to like, sometimes doing the right thing isn't doing the right thing. And sometimes you feel like terminating that individual from your studio isn't, maybe you're their hobby and they spend time with you and you know what the situation is, and that maybe dismissing them isn't, the best for them. But at the same time, you've weighed your options and they tick off the boxes as either toxic or grossly unreliable, or they're just unwilling to change who they are. And then you have to say, well, they got to be let go. Is that the right thing for you? Yes. Is that the right thing for them? Probably not. Take it from me. The saying that I'm going to say, I have to live by sometimes is, we are the hero in our own stories, but in someone else's story, we want to be the villain. And trust me when I say I've probably played the villain in someone else's story along the way. And it's not something that I know that I have to I had to make some decisions. They've been made. What can I learn from it? And then we move on. And then sometimes all we can do is just take a deep breath and handle the next thing as it comes. And as a practicing school counselor, that's one of my favorite questions to ask my students is, do you know how to breathe? And of course, they're going to answer, yes, Mr. Vela, I know how to breathe, but do you really? And a breathing exercise I walk them through is you breathe in for 3 seconds, you hold it for 3 seconds, and then you release for 3 seconds. And they do that 3 times. I know the rule of threes, right? And usually I ask them afterwards, how does that feel? And they're like, I feel better. Okay, now let's talk about what's going on. And sometimes we have to take stock in that, and we have to take time to breathe, because breathing should be automatic. But sometimes we have to take that moment and realize, yeah, we're overwhelmed in this moment. Let's take a breath and on to the next thing. And let's do the right thing. So enough about enough about me mostly. I'm probably more talking still, but enough about me mostly talking. I'm going to open the floor up to some Q&A. I'm sure people have questions. Anyone have anything any pressing? Welcome to tell stories too, as long as they don't violate anyone's, NDA.
So I got 2 things to kind of contribute on this. One, and I'm not sure whether you're going to cover it later, Paul, but don't be afraid to fail. You kind of touched on it, as long as you learn something. I always tell this story. There was a guy who just couldn't get his career on track. He tried everything, including opening up a general store. That failed so badly, I mean, driving him into bankruptcy, that it also drove his wife into depression, requiring hospitalization. Yet somehow things managed to turn around for Abraham Lincoln. That was the joke, but it's true. I mean, Lincoln's wife, Mary Lincoln, suffered from depression, and a lot of it, came from that period where the general store failed. So there's that. The other thing that I was going to ask, and Paul, I don't know if you know the answer to this, but who is the founder of Microsoft? And it's actually a trick question, but let me give you the trick part of it. Bill Gates was the co-founder, but who was the guy that hired him?
I'll be honest, I don't know the answer to that question.
The recently deceased Paul Allen that owned, among other things, the Seattle Sonics and the Seattle Seahawks teams. At one time was competing with Larry Ellison for the biggest yacht in the world. The reason that I kind of bring that up is the interesting thing about Paul Allen is that in 1975 he was already working as a programmer. And he had met this kid who was still in college at Harvard, but he talked the kid into dropping out of school and joining him, because Paul knew that he was better at business than he was at software, and he wanted to create a software company. So he hired a guy that was smarter at certain things than him. It's just kind of a cool story. I mean, so don't be afraid to fail, and also know what you don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, own that kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
So, so Dustin asked, 3 months seems generous for a contractor. And then Alex kind of followed up with it. I thought the same, 3 days. So what we arrived to that conclusion was that Women Independent Studios, until this moment, has been mostly a once-a-week operation. So 3 months, we usually meet on Saturdays. Usually the development days from noon till 6 p.m. A little bit over, a little bit before. It really depends on the day. The fact that 3 months of 3 Saturdays worth comes out about to be what, 12 days, so 2 weeks. Little generous with the weekends in there and all that. So we give people about 2 weeks. You know I get it. 3 days you don't show up to work, you're not gonna get paid. You're gonna get fired. We get all that. Yeah, life happens. We get people. We're not their priority. We're not gonna be their main source of income. So life happens. So we decided to be generous and thinking about it. We'll probably have to change that policy. When we do buy the island in the Maldives, and we have to keep people working 5 days a week, and that would probably have to change. But for the moment, that's where the number comes from. You prefer to type any questions in?
How do you measure productivity? Do you use Git or SVN or any place for?
A good question. So Grover and the other team leads at our company usually measure tasks in a hacking plan. So they determine what stage in the task is assigned, whether either it's in progress or it's ready for final inspection or testing, and then it finally gets moved to the completed category once everything is copacetic. We also use Plastic for file calibration. I don't know if anyone saw that in the comments. Yeah.
Just a comment about having regular check-ins and making that responsible. It gives you a different way of measuring productivity, especially if you're only meeting once a week, right?
Mm-hmm.
Somebody may be contributing, but maybe Saturday just doesn't work for them. Okay. The other thing that I was going to tell you anecdotally is we got into a dispute with a company over a contract thing. And they asked us to document the amount of work that had been put in. And they were contending that we didn't do the work, or we hadn't done the work that we had obviously done by the outcome. We just showed them, we actually produced a log of Git check-ins. And their own lawyer said, we're done with this. If we went to court on this, we'd be thrown out, because they're clearly showing not only the length, the start and the end times of it, but all the code that had been checked in during that. So it was just that's not why we use Git. It was not a decision that we made because one day a lawyer will want to see this, but it did work out that way.
And maybe I was the once a day development day. There are multiple meetings that take place during the week as well.
Okay.
Those times for those check-ins to happen. I know we had a marketing team meeting earlier today. Go figure, right? So these times for check-ins is so valuable, because everyone who comes to the table at these meetings knows what everyone else is doing, and not everyone is intrinsically motivated, and their motivation comes from other people doing work. So once everyone comes together and says everything they were doing, it gives people other motivation to do stuff. Any other questions, comments, concerns, caustic remarks? So, Grover, Larry, I don't know how much time you want to give for this, but at the end of that's the conclusion of my presentation.
I'm just going to come in here.
Yeah, just come in here. Yeah.
Thank you all.
Notice the way Grover says thank you all. It was timed with the slide that says thank you, but got it. Yep.
It was really, I didn't plan that at all. So Grover just barged into the room again. So yeah, I'm really proud of the state where whimindie's at, and how far we've come from a little 10-man team working out of the back of a closed down building in San Bernardino to being a multi-state, multinational
Yeah.
Yeah, operation with, literally, dozens of team members. So the main takeaway from all this, folks, is, if you want to start your own business, you want to put your mind to it. And like what Larry alluded to, don't be afraid to fail. You can do it too, though. This, you write your own story kind of thing.
I tell people all the time, if I can make it in the games industry, the bar clearly has to be set low.
Hey, I don't know about that, Larry. I set the bar pretty low myself. So, here we are.
I will tell you, I also use the underpants gnomes from South Park in my presentation.
See, great minds think alike.
And I always comment that I don't know anybody in business that they may only have watched one episode of South Park, but that's the one that they watched.
Right. That's the one. Yeah. What's the middle stage right there, right?
All we need is step 2.
That's all we need.
Well, Paul, I think that the questions are kind of running down. Thank you as well, Cassie, for attending. We'll be back next month. I'm going to announce the speaker now. We're going to have Brianna Wu, who has been very active in, was one of the original targets, unfortunately, in the early days of Gamergate, and has been very active in the Me Too movement. Brianna is really particularly interesting in that she, as a studio head, also spans into politics. She ran for office in Massachusetts, and she's recently announced that she's been named the CEO of a political action committee. So that will be coming up. The month after that, I'm in conversations with a couple of game industry journalists. So I'm hoping to have something in particular on the topic of the necessity of investigative journalism in the games industry. I think we've all been watching our current Me Too movement, which has affected everything from Ubisoft to the Smash Brothers community, and pretty much everything in between. And I think that the two speakers are not unrelated. We've needed champions in the field, but we also need the people that are willing to turn over rocks and shine a light on what's underneath that. So thank you, everybody, for attending. And Paul, thank you for a wonderful presentation. Grover, thank you for everything you have done.
Yeah, I agree. Grover, thank you so much for your IGDA presence. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers, everybody. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. Have a good night. Be safe.
Take care, guys. Thank you for everything.